All right, all. We're going to continue. We're holding. Let's bring up the text. Okay. Hold on. Actually, I have to go online. Give me a second.
Your text came up.
Hold on. Okay. All right. So, make sure it's live. Okay. So we're bringing up. We're here. Um, we're holding in the middle of the subject of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, the great Rabbi Shua ben Levi. There's a fantastic piece on Rabbi Shua ben Levi from Eli Wiesel. It's worth to read to learn about him. It's a great personality. Talmud tells us physical body went up to heaven. So we said, we're just going to go quickly through where we said last week. It says, Rabbi Shua ben Levi says as follows, that Nashim Chayavis Mikra Megillah. So he uses the language like this. Women are obligated in the reading of the Megillah. It doesn't say that they're obligated to listen to the Megillah. Because of this, we spoke last week about the conversation between the Rishonim, the early commentaries about what level, when it says the women are obligated in the reading of the Megillah as opposed to listening to the Megillah, means can they actually, hey Avi, can they actually be moitzi? Can they include others in their reading? Other women, children? Can children include women? Can women include men? Why? They're also part of the miracle. We also spoke last week about the Rashbam, who quotes that the question is if, like Rashi says, that they were part of the miracle because the Gzeira was on women, meaning to say that the decree of of Haman and the Persians was on the women just like it was on the men. Hey, Bruce. And we're on page 4a, and from Rabbi Shua ben Levi, middle of the page, towards the top middle. And Rabbi Shua ben Levi says that women are also part of the miracle. So Rashi says that the decree was on them. The Rashbam, we learned in Tosfos, quotes that the personalities of the story of Purim were mainly women, like in Hanukkah and like in Yetzias Mitzrayim, because Esther, who was one of the main characters of the story, was a woman. So therefore, they have an obligation. Tosfos has a question on that because the language af means to say inclusive, that they're also, but not that they're the main part of the main part of the miracle, where according to the Rashbam, they would be the main part of the miracle. Okay, so I just want to quickly, there's many questions about this law that we spoke about last week, and we have an amazing Tosfos that, again, we're not going to learn all the Tosfos, but when we have a Tosfos that's easy and a Tosfos that's important, we're going to learn it if we could explain it well. So just all the questions about women reading the Megillah, it's because, again, a lot of the challenges in the language, as opposed to saying it that they're chayiv, they're obligated to listen. It says they're obligated to read, which gives them. And the question is, what level is obligation? Because a woman that has is it rabbinic or is it ke'ein min Torah, like biblical? Because there's the part of Purim that's although it's a rabbinic holiday because it was instituted by the rabbis, but it was written with Ruach HaKodesh. So it has a certain status of ke'ein daraisa, and there's those means like biblical, and there's those who want to say that the woman's obligation is only rabbinic, doesn't apply to the like biblical that was instituted for the holiday, and therefore the woman, because they're only rabbinic, they wouldn't have the ability to include to be moitzi a man, because a man would have sort of say this like biblical obligation to listen to the Megillah, where the woman would only be rabbinic. There's a lot of challenge to that idea because even if you want to say the women are rabbinic, there's still an ability for someone who's rabbinic to also mitzad to also include someone else. So there's a lot of discussion within Arevis. There's a question: can a child read the Megillah under the age of 13? Because it says that also children, they're also part of the miracle. All these questions come in. The conclusion basically is that there is opinions that say women could read the Megillah for other groups of women, as opposed to there's very few opinions that agree that the woman could read a Megillah for a man. And there are opinions that hold that children can read a Megillah for the women because they are in a similar status of obligation, although it's a question of chinuch, of education. Okay, that we spoke about this last week, so I don't want to go into detail, although there's much more detail about this question and about we did the Tosfos, these two Tosfos on it. But before we do that, let's just read the next Rabbi Shua ben Levi again. They should have separated the text from the commentary at this point, but they didn't, so we don't want to go back. So it says, Amr Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Purim Shcholis b'Shabbos. If Purim falls out on Shabbos, in those days it could have been the 14th or the 15th. Today it's only possible on the 15th because our calendar doesn't allow for the 14th, meaning the Purim that's commonly celebrated, not in Jerusalem or walled cities. Cannot fall out on Shabbos. It could fall on Friday or Sunday, obviously. But if it falls out on a Shabbos, which the 15th does all the time, so then Shoylim v'Darshim Minyani Shayoim. So then we expand upon the subject of the day. Rashi says means, what does that mean, Shoylim v'Darshim, that we expand on the holiday? And we're going to learn a bit more about this subject in a second because it's a halachic question. That Ma'amidim Turgaman, they would put up an interpreter, which was the custom those days when they studied something. The teacher would have an interpreter, Lefnei Achacham, before the wise person, meaning the teacher, Lidreshe Geras Purim Baravim, to learn the Megillah. There's a machlekes if it was that they learned the Megillah or they learned the laws of Purim. The problem with learning the laws of Purim is that the laws of Purim are mainly around the obligation of the Megillah reading. And hey Shuki, we're on 4a. The laws of the Megillah reading, you read the Megillah, right? If Purim falls out on Shabbos, what's the law? We backdate the Megillah to Thursday night and Friday. So they already read the Megillah. What would be the point of learning the laws of the Megillah if they learned the Megillah already? They read the Megillah already. Although the other questions, there's still a Simchas Yom Tov, and there's still Mashalach Monais that we do on Sunday. But nevertheless, it's therefore Rashi says that they would teach the Megillah, they would teach the Geras, meaning the text of the Megillah they would learn on Shabbos. We're going to learn more about that because the Gemara goes into the subject a little more. Before we do that, I want to learn this Tosfos. It's very rare to find a Tosfos like this. This is a Tosfos Tosfos was the academy in France. They're called the Ballet Tosfos. Those were and they had a membership of people that lived all around Europe, mainly what we would call today Western Europe, or the Ashkenazi countries of Europe, France, maybe Germany. Rashi was the grandfather of a lot of the Balei Tosfos. Rashi was the grandfather of Rabbeinu Tam, of the Rashbam, but we also found that there were Balei Tosfos in London. So London had the Balei Tosfos, but the main academy was in France, and they have they're one of the authorities on the commentaries on the Talmud, but also much more halachic inclined versus Rashi being a pirush, an explanation on the Talmud. So we have a lot of psukim, we have a lot of rules and laws that have been clarified in the Balei Tosfos on the Gemara, like the Rabbeinu Tam's many times, etc. So here he writes psak. He's giving it clear, no misunderstanding. Here I'm writing a piece on the laws of how according to the Balei Tosfos do we perform the laws of Purim, as far as the Megillah and the Al Hanisim go, which is the Megillah reading and the parts we insert into the tefillah, into the prayer. So he says, "V'omer pa Al Hanisim." We say Al Hanisim. B'tefillah in the davening, meaning Shmona Esrei, the Amidah. Where do we say it? Ubahayda, in the modim. Now, it took me a long time to figure out this little piece over here. It's a simple piece, but I couldn't figure out what it was. There's people who don't say kishem. What is kishem? So kishem is a late end part of the Al Hanisim, which says, just like you did a miracle in the days of Esther, do a miracle for us. So kishem is just like, which is something that's not in any, I didn't see it in any Sidurim, that they have this kishem in the end of Al Hanisim. Why? He says, there's those who don't say. He only says, she'ein. Because our rabbis have taught us in the tractate of Brachos, this is because in the first three and the last three blessings of the Shemona Esrei, that's not the place you ask for things. Those are kind of praises of God. The parts that we ask for things are the middle blessings from Atachonen through Shema Koleinu. And those are the parts of the blessings of the Amidah where we have questions. Ask God for knowledge, for refuah, for healing, for parnasa, for gathering of the Jewish people in the Geula and the redemption, al tzaddikim, all the blessings that we have that are asking for things. But we don't ask for things in the first three blessings and the last three blessings, meaning to say that if a person has a private tefillah, we know you're allowed to have private prayers during the Amidah. You can't insert them into you have to check when you can insert them. Some people say you can only insert them per subject. If you're doing Baruch Aleinu, you could talk about Parnasa. In Rifa'enu, you could talk about Refuah. Or there's those who say that all the personal quests that you have should go into Shema Kolenu, into the final of the quest. But you're not allowed to ask for personal things in the first three blessings and the last three blessings. So therefore, there's those who say you can't add in the Kishem, because the Kishem means you're asking God that He should do miracles for us today, as He did then in the time of Purim, and that's something you can't do. But the Tosfos says that's a shtus. That's a foolish thing to say. That's the reason why we can't say the Kishem in the Al Hanisim. Why? Who Rishtusu? It's a foolish thing to say. This only applies to an individual that prays, can only pray, ask for private blessings in the middle blessings, not in the first three or the last three. Avul b'shvil hatzibur, but in a congregation, when the congregation is saying it, shari, it should be allowed. And therefore, when you put it in the tefillah, then it's the lashon of everyone. It's talking about a private prayer. You can have a private, isolated prayer for yourself, for so and so. Mendy Levitin, that it should be that I'm asking something in Ata Kadosh or in Ata Gibor or in Magen Avram. But if it's in the language of the tefillah, then it's shari. Tosfos says then it's allowed. So why don't we say the kashem? Again, I didn't see any siddur that has the kashem. Maybe I'm wrong. Others could show me differently. Tosfos says we don't say the kashem for another reason. Mishum the Amr Chacham, because our rabbis told us in another tractate, Psachim Daf, in the tractate of Psachim that talks about Pesach on 117.2. The Chol Davar the Havel Lahaba Tiknu Lahaba. You can't ask for something for the future, Lahaba. You have to ask for it in a future blessing. The blessing of Moedim is the past. We're talking about things that are happened. We're thanking God for the miracles He did. So it's the past. Therefore, we mention Alanisim in the Haida, in Moedim, because it was also something that happened, the miracle of Purim or Chanukah that happened. The Havel Sha'avar. So therefore he stops over here. Here should be a paragraph that ends the question of the kishem. So we do not say the kishem according to Tosfos, but not because of the reason that others mention, because it is a private blessing, but the reason is because it is Ariel, if you don't mind putting on a mute unless you have a question, or if it's because
No, I did mute it. I did. I did have it on mute.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So,
I have a question though.
Go ahead, Avi.
What is does Tosfos say anything about like Uchtov L'chaim Tovim Kol B'nei Britecha, which is in basically the same section?
Maybe that's why we do it, because it's a lashon klali. It's a tefillah for everyone. It's a good question. I was thinking in general, when during the year, during the regular Shemoneh Esrei, we don't have really so much to ask in Magen Avram or Mechayim Esim. But on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, we have the long blessings, and like you said, we have also Sim Shalom. We have Sefer Chaim, right? Sefer Chaim is also in the last three blessings. So it's a good point. Maybe that's based on what the Tosaf says, because it's Lashon Rabbim. It's everyone saying it. But to have a private tefillah, maybe that's based on that. I wonder what the opinions would say, because it's a personal quest. If they would have the nusach of saying Sefer Chaim, like you had, it's a good question. It's a very good question. But I would assume that according to Tosfos, it wouldn't be a problem. Tosfos' opinion, because Tosfos says if everyone's saying it, it's not a problem. Oh, he's saying Sefer Chaim Tovim is also futuristic as opposed to Lahaba.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah. That's another good question. And so the same thing would be. It's a good question. I have to think about that. It's a good question. Maybe we have to check the Marsha. It could be. I mean, unless I'm wrong, unless is a statement for tefillah. As is to maybe we're pronouncing a fact versus a tefillah. That's a tzarachian. That's a very good question. Okay, Ubelel Yudalid, I have to check, I'll get back to you. Ubelel Yudalid on the 14th, now he goes back. So what do we do on the 14th of meaning the night of Purim? La'achet Tfilas Ma'ariv, after the Ma'ariv. Omer Kaddish Shalom, we say a full Kaddish. This mamash is like coming out of Shulchan Aruch. You very rarely see this in a Tosfos. I mean, I'm not an expert in Tosfos, but this is something like to start off a psak like that. V'achakach, Koires Megillah, after Kaddish Shalom, we read the Megillah. Mivarach, and when we read the Megillah, we read Lefanel, Gimel Brachas, the first three blessings that we make on the Megillah. V'achara bracha achas, and afterwards we have the final blessing that we complete the Megillah. Ad hakel haMashiach until we finish the Hakel Mashiach, which finishes off the blessing of the final blessing of Purim, of the Megillah, sorry. Then Hishlim Oimed Lifnei Ateva for Oimed, then we continue and we go to the Omed and we say Ata Kaddish, which is our custom. We say the Ata Kaddish after the Megillah, which is most of the Uvalat Tzion, but we don't say the Valat Tzion. We don't start with the Valat Tzion. And this is applying to Matzah Shabbos as well, Saturday night, when we say the Ata Kaddish, we don't mention Geula at night. Especially aside for the Gal Yisrael, obviously Michamocha, we don't mention Geula at night, and therefore, okay, one could ask what that means. We have to check about what that means because Maskirin Yisrael Mitzrayim Baleles. But even there, Lefisha Ein Geula Balayla, V'im Matzei Shabbos, maybe because the redemption itself won't happen on night. V'im Matzei Shabbos, and if it's Saturday night, where we also say, then we say V'hinoyam as well. So koydem before Vata Kaddish, which is what our custom is. We have the Vinaim and Vata Kaddish. So we would say the Kaddish Shalom, read the Megillah, the full Kaddish, read the Megillah, and then say the Vihinaim and Vata Kaddish. Ukshreitza Nikreis. Paishet Eskula koydem Kigeres. And how do we read the Megillah? We don't read the Megillah like a Sefer Torah. But you read like an Igeris. Means you have to unroll the entire Megillah first. This is Pashat, the halachas of how we're supposed to do Megillah. And then we fold it into a Igeris, like a note, like we hold it like a piece of paper, like a letter. And we don't read it like a Sefer Torah, means unscroll it. As we're reading it, means as we go from page to page to unscroll it. That's good. That ends up Ma'ariv. That's night. Okay, so we don't say the Kashem and Alanisim. We say Kaddish Shalom. We read the Megillah. We say Vata Kaddish. We don't start with the Voltzin because we don't say Gula at night. If it's Matzah Shabbos, we say the Vihinoyim, and then we read the Megillah like an Igeris, like a note, as a letter, so to say, as opposed to as a scroll. Okay, Ubashachar in the morning, Mispal Shmon Esrei. We do Kevidav obviously Shachris. We say the Shmon Esrei the Amidah. Shmon Esrei brachas, we say the 18 blessings, which is the Amidah. For Omer Alanisim Bahida, again we say the Alanisim in Modim, in acknowledgement, which is the one of the final blessings. The Ein Omerim Kishem, again we do not say Kishem. Fishakola bracha Eini El L'Shavar, because we only talk about the past in that blessing and not about the future. Again, back to Avi's question, we have to check. V'im Kain Ein Leimer Ba Davar Shlaba, we wouldn't say Kishem, so he just repeats what he said before. We wouldn't add the Kashem, which is a special addition that some people would think to add in the Alanisim. Kaddish. And then we say Kaddish Adam Miron, meaning Chatzi Kaddish. Sefer Torah. We take out the Sefer Torah. Again, this is Pashat, the Tosos is telling us how we're supposed to schedule Purim. We read the Parsha of Vayavei Malik, which is the Vayavei Malik, I believe, is the part in Beshalach, yeah. And Alpha Pishain Ba'el Tes Psukim, after checking that, I remember reading about that. We learned about it in the laws of Chil Sefer Torah. Although there's only 9 verses there, and we try to have 10 verses when we read a Parsha. We don't return the Sefer Torah to its place, meaning we don't put the Sefer Torah back in the ark. So what do? We hold the Torah. Whoever did Hagba holds the Torah. And then we read the Megillah. And we do like we did at night, which is the 3 blessings in the morning, the 3 blessings before, and the 1 blessing after. Kedepirish bifnim. Then we say Ashrei, Tehillim David. Then we say the Voltzin. By night we say the full thing. By day we say the full thing. We do not say the Lam Natzeach, which is chapter 20, which we never say on days that we don't say Tachnun. Why? He says because it talks about the pain of the Jewish people, and we don't mention the pain on Purim. Seemingly something separate, unique to Purim versus other times. Our custom is, and the Alter Rebbe has it in the Siddur, of all the days we do not say chapter 20 after Ashrei, between Voltzin and Ashrei. We do not say Tachnun on the 14th or the 15th, no matter where you're celebrating Purim. If you celebrate Purim on the 14th and Shushan Purim, we don't say Tachnun, or if you're celebrating on the 15th and you're in Jerusalem, you also don't say Tachnun on the 14th. Why? Mishum dechsiv yimei mishta v'simcha. because it's supposed to be days of happiness. And if it's days of happiness, then we shouldn't be saying the Tachnun. V'oimer, this is also a custom. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this. The custom is to say chapter 22 of Tehillim, which is Maseches Ayelet HaShachar. Maseches Ayelet HaShachar is, but we're going to learn Ayelet HaShachar is referring to Esther. Esther is Ayelet HaShachar. And the whole chapter 22 is a chapter that's been saying on behalf of Esther and Mordechai. Tosfos says the reason why we say Ayelet HaShachar Chav Beis, which is the custom till today, people do say chapter 22. It's not in the Chabad Siddur, but it's definitely the custom that people do say chapter 22 on Purim, is because it talks about the Mapal of the Chavim, how the Jews, how the enemies of the Jews are going to fall. V'chein b'leil arba asar. So too, he says that there's a custom to say it at the 14th at night to say chapter 22, although he should have maybe mentioned that before. Then he says, we say the Enkelokenu, and you continue finishing off the davening as you would in any day of the week. Meaning, say not, we don't have a special Shabbos, there's no Musaf. That is the psak of our Balei Tosfos to tell us how exactly we do the halachas of Purim, which is again very interesting. Now he says again, the small Tosfos over here, it says, Purim Shcholis b'Shabbos. What happens if Purim falls out on Shabbos? So Dafka b'Shabbos lifisha ein koren Megillah. So Tosfos says that the reason why we're Shalom v'Darshim, why do we talk about learning the Megillah according to Rashi? Not everyone's going to agree that's talking about learning the Megillah, is because we don't read the Megillah, so we do something else. We learn about the Megillah. Mishum Gezer d'Rabba. Why don't we read the Megillah on Shabbos? We're going to learn because we have a concern which is called Gezer d'Rabba, used a few times in Halacha on Shofar and Lulav, which is the concern that one may carry outside of an Erev or outside of a private domain on Shabbos, the Megillah. So Rabbah instituted that we should not read or do certain things on Shabbos because of the concern someone's going to carry. So here the Balei Tosfos say that we don't have to learn the Megillah in the week because we read the Megillah. And he says, "V'tafi, it's better because there's more pesumei nisa, there's more publication or publicizing the miracle." Whether he means because of the content of how we read the Megillah or because of the Rov HaMadras Melech, that when we read the Megillah in a kind of a communal setting like we do, brings more awareness to the miracle and to publicize the miracle of Purim versus, so to say, the miracle of studying the Megillah, the text. Okay. Now let's do Rabbi Steinsaltz's footnotes, which he did not do last week. Rabbi Evan Yisrael. Nashim chayavas, women are obligated. Reading the Megillah is a positive time-bound mitzvah, meaning a mitzvah that's time sensitive. And we know, and the general principle is that women are exempt from such mitzvahs. A mitzvah that has to be done in a certain time, women are exempt from doing. So why the Megillah is also time sensitive, right? It's only we just learned the past few weeks how time sensitive it is. So why are women obligated to listen to the Megillah? Nevertheless, there are some commandments that are exceptions to this principle. And one of them is the Megillah, because, like it says, they were part of the miracle. In Chovas Yar, there is an extensive discussion as to whether this principle applies to rabbinic commandments in general. It's a general question, if the idea of mitzvah shazman groma, that a mitzvah that's time sensitive, there are opinions that say that's only talking about biblical mitzvahs. But rabbinic mitzvahs, that even the positive mitzvahs are gzeira, even though this is not really so much falling under gzeira, that there's a discussion in general that exemption doesn't apply to rabbinic commandments, positive commandments. Obviously, there's no prohibitions that women are exempt from. Here we're talking about positive commandments, but in the positive commandments there's a discussion if this applies to rabbinic mitzvahs versus only to biblical mitzvahs. So we learned the Tosfos that talks about the two opinions, if it's because they were the main characters of the miracle or because they were also saved by the miracle. So Reb Steinsaltz goes into this discussion. Rashi and most commentaries, the Gaoner, Rabbeinu Yonah, Rashba, Ran, explain that women were included in Haman's decree to destroy all of the Jews, right? He was going to destroy all the Jews. So therefore, they're part of the miracle. And therefore, it is fitting for them to take part in giving thanks because they were saved. This explanation is found in the Jerusalem Talmud as well. Alternatively, Rav Haigon, which is from the other Gaonim, we learned about Rav Haigon, the final of the Gaonim, Rashi, in Psachim 108b, and the Rashbam, the Balatosfos, explained that a woman, that's the Rashbam that we studied in our Tosfos, that Esther was the main catalyst of the miracle. Tosfos himself objects to the Rashbams, to this interpretation of the Gemara's intent, due to the phrase "as they too," which indicates, means af, as if too, indicates that even a woman are obligated, but not that they are the main focus of the celebration. So that's the reason why Tosfos didn't agree with one of his colleagues, the Rashbam, because when we say Tosfos doesn't agree, it means the consensus of the yeshiva, right? The Rashash responds to this. Rashash answers to try to clarify the Rashbam's opinion that it's because the women are the main character that this phrase is used commonly in the Gemara with regard to items that are essential of a central role. That even though the Hebrew language af kind of says they were also, as opposed to being a primary part of the miracle, but the Rashash says that's not. You don't find that in the Talmud. We find that af doesn't only mean to add, to include, but it also could mean that they're the primary reason, and it's not just to refer to them that they play a secondary role. Okay, Reb Steinsaltz says, what does it mean that we ask Shalom V'Darshim? We learn about the laws of Purim. Rashi and the Ritva explain that the intention is that they preach in public and recount the miracle of Purim. They say over the story of Purim. However, other commentaries maintain that they teach the halachas of Purim. So says the Rashba. Now, on the Rashba that says that they learned the laws of Purim, was the question that I asked. That others ask, how could you say that a lot of the laws have already been done? They read the Megillah already. Nashim chayavis mikra Megillah. Okay, Reb Steinsaltz says. He's now going to quote the Shari Tshuva and the Shulchan Aruch and the Chaim. He says like this. Women are obligated to read in reading the Megillah. All are obligated to read or hear the Megillah. Obviously, you don't have to read the Megillah yourself. Most people, a large percentage of people, don't read the Megillah, but they listen to the Megillah. Most people don't know how to read the Megillah, myself included. So all are obligated to read or hear the Megillah. Men, women, and converts, and freed slaves. Some say that even Kanani slaves, Evet Kanani, are obligated, because they have some mitzvahs, are obligated in this mitzvah. So says the Magen Avram, citing the Beis Yosef on the Shulchan Aruch, on the tour. There's also an obligation to educate the children to read it. A minor who reaches the age of education, means chinuch, can discharge a woman's obligation. Okay, so here we find, he quotes that the Shari Tshuva, Shulchan Aruch, and Or Chaim says that a child who's of chinuch can include a woman if he reads the Megillah, to hear the Megillah. In cases where one who has already read the Megillah reads it, it is again for a woman to hear. A minor who reaches the age of education can discharge a woman's obligation to hear the Megillah. In cases where one who has already read the Megillah reads it, it is again for a woman to hear. That's why she has to hear. There are some who instruct the woman to make the blessings herself, but it's not fitting to do so. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch says that if someone's who heard the Megillah is reading it for a woman, because they're obligated to their chiyuv, so therefore they should make the brachas themselves, which is the halach in shofar, right? If you blow the shofar for someone, the woman makes the shofar. But here he says it's not befitting to do so. Rather, the reader should bless. So the halach is that the reader blesses, not the. This is what he's quoting from the Shari Tshuva and Shulchan Aruch, Or Chaim 689. That even if a man is reading for a woman and he heard it already, if he didn't hear it, so obviously he makes the blessing. That applies in any case when the reader makes the blessings. But if you already heard it and you're reading it now for a woman who didn't hear it yet, so there are those who say that the woman makes the blessings, but he says it's not befitting, maybe because of tznius, and then the reader should make the blessings on behalf of the woman. When the 15th of Adar occurs on Shabbos, why do you say 15th? Because, like I said before, our calendar does not allow for the 14th. That's a technicality, or if you want to call it that, a technicality, but that's just a fact. The 14th will never fall out on Shabbos in our calendar, but the 15th can and does. Those in walled cities read the Megillah and distribute gifts to the poor on the eve of Shabbos, meaning Thursday night, Friday. On Shabbos, they take out an additional Torah scroll and read the portion generally read on Purim. So now he's going to teach us in this footnote how we perform what's called the Purim Mishulash, a 3-day Purim, which I've experienced many times here in Jerusalem. So what we do is, if Purim falls out on the 15th, and I have to keep Purim on the 15th because I'm in Jerusalem, So we don't read a Megillah on Shabbos, like we said, we're going to learn, because Gezer de Rabbah, we're not allowed to read the Megillah on Shabbos. So we read the Megillah Thursday night, Friday, with the people who listen to the Megillah on the 14th. So we have the same schedule. And the Megillah has to go together with gifts for the poor. So the gifts of the poor have to get the gifts on Thursday night, Friday. So on the Shabbos, then we take out the additional Torah. So then we have that part, which is the reading of the Torah part of Amalek, and read the portion generally read on Purim, which is in Exodus 17, 8 through 16. In addition to regular weekly Torah portion that we read on the Shabbos, obviously. They also recite the blessings of the miracles during the prayer on Shabbos. So the Alanisim and Kriyas HaTorah of Purim is on Shabbos. So there's 6 main mitzvahs on Purim, which are Megillah reading, gifts to the poor, reading the Torah of Amalek, putting in the Alanisim, meal, celebration, and gifts to your friends, right? So, Mishalach Manis. First 2 are done on Thursday night, Friday, if you have a Purim Mishalish, which is Megillah and gifts to the poor. The next 2, which is the reading of the Torah of Amalek and Alanisim, is Bo B'Yom, because you could do that. So we read and we put in the Alanisim on Shabbos itself. The sending of gifts and the Purim feast is performed on Sunday, so that we push off to Sunday, and we're going to learn why can't we do the obviously you can't, the same reason you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. The gifts, and the gifts you have to be able to carry, and the gifts are made to give each other meals. In the olden days, gifts today became very fancy. In those days, they would give, actually, you have to eat ready food. It's part of the meals. Like you can't just buy, like, those in the, today it's very nice we give chocolates, but once upon a time they gave actually food. Such a Purim is called a 3-part Purim Mishulash. As residents of the wall cities perform various aspects of Purim celebration over the course of 3 days, like I said, Friday, Shabbos, and Sunday. Some say the feast and the giving of the gifts is done both and on Shabbos and on Sunday. So there's a shita, the Pri Chodesh Shulchan Aruch Chaim 688, that says that there is an idea that you should have a kind of Purim Suda on the Shabbos itself. Okay. We went off text for quite a bit, and let's get back to the text of the Talmud. My Ira Purim. So now the question is, what are we referring to? The statement that Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, was it Rabbi Shua ben Levi? I forgot it already. That Darsh Shalom V'Darshim, that was supposed to, according to Rashi, read the Megillah, according to others, learn the laws of Purim on Purim. Afil Yom Tov Nami. Every holiday we're supposed to learn about the holiday on the holiday and even before the holiday, 30 days before the holiday. The Tanya we learned Moshe Tikkun Yisrael Shir Shalom V'Darshim Yan Shel Yom. Moshe instituted that you should always be learning about the day on the day. So that's not unique to Purim. That Rabbi Shua ben Levi has to say that that on Purim that falls out on Shabbos, we're supposed to be learning the Megillah, according to Rashi. So Hilchas Pesach, Hilchas Atzeres, Batzeres, Hilchas Chag B'Chag. A person has to learn about the laws of Passover on Passover, the laws of Shavuos on Shavuos, and the laws of Chag, which is Sukkot on Sukkot. This Tosfos says that he asked the question that when it says what Afilu Yom Tov Nami, what does it mean? Oh, what are we asking? The other Yom Tovs also we have to learn. It says nearly the Achi Pirsha means my ira Purim the ein darshan by Mikoidim lechein shleishim yom dem shem hachi lidish by b'yem Afilu Yom Tov the darshin shleishim yom lefana Afilu hachi darshin by b'yem. Means you would think Tosfos saying this. We know there's an obligation that 30 days before the holiday we learn about the holiday. 30 days before Pesach, you're supposed to start learning the laws of Passover. 30 days before Sukkot, we start learning for Sukkot. And 30 days before Shavuos, you learn for Shavuos. So you would think that it's not really about Shavuos. It's a question if it's there. You would think that that maybe you don't have to learn about the laws on the day itself if you learn it 30 days before. But he says, nevertheless, you learn about it on the days as well, not just the 30 days before. Like it says, Vaydab Moshe Moed Hashem. Moshe said the holidays on the day. You're supposed to learn it on the day. So what's the chiddush of Rabbi Shua ben Levi about Purim? So the Gemara answers Purim mitzvah chalev. Rabbi Shua ben Levi had to tell us about Purim specifically. I would have thought nigzer mishum de Rabbah, that because of the concern of Rabbah, which is that we may carry the Torah scroll on Shabbos. Sorry, the Megillah scroll on Shabbos. Therefore, maybe the whole reading of the Megillah shouldn't be done on Shabbos. So the studying of the Megillah. Kamash Malan comes to teach us no, that we don't read the Megillah, but we study it.
But aren't they afraid we might carry the book that we study on?
No, he says like this. Look, he says, Rabbi Shimon Levi therefore teaches us that expanding the halachas of the day is not prohibited as preventative measure. Let us read the Megillah on Shabbos. It means as a preventative measure, least one read the Megillah on Shabbos. It's not. We're not concerned so far. I mean, the Megillah reading is something. Maybe there's someone to read the Megillah, but taking a chumash or studying, having a conversation about the Megillah is less of a concern. So he says, Rashi says, Mishum derabbe, the goes the kamon. We're going to learn later that Nikreis Megillah, Shemi Avreno Abra Ames B'Shus Ram, you may carry the Megillah 4 feet in the 4 cubics in a public domain. Afkan Gazru, Drasha Atikri. We maybe think that we shouldn't learn about it, the Drasha. Maybe they're going to come to read it. So he says, no, there's no concern. We don't say it. Because first of all, Aaron, to answer your question, you don't have to have the text to have a discussion about the Megillah, or even to learn the laws of the Megillah according to those opinions. And to say that maybe someone's going to take the text to carry it, they're not so concerned. Okay, let's just continue the text inside. Let's try to cover some ground. Rabbi Shimon Levi says as follows. We learned this already in the Tosfos that we have to read the Megillah at night. Now the question is, what's the word v'lishnoisa? The word lishnoisa is also from the word mishnah, to study. The word lishnoisa also can mean to repeat. So therefore, there's going to be a confusion in the yeshiva what Rabbi Shimon Levi meant. But Rabbi Shimon Levi says, "Chayv adam likros to Megillah b'layla, v'lishnoisa b'yom, to learn it, to read it again by day." Like it says, he quotes the verse again, the verse in chapter 22, which is we're supposed to say on Purim because it's connected to Purim, and alikai. Where you say, "Oh my Lord, Ekra Yoimam, I call by day, V'lo Sana, you do not answer, V'layla, and I call at day, but you do not answer, and at night, and there is no circase for me. There's no V'lo Dumeli," meaning which alludes to the Megillah both by day and by night. There's Laila and Yom. V'shanoisa. Rashi says, why do we learn? Why do we have to talk to read the Megillah twice? Because they cried in their pain, right? That you couldn't silence me, is because they were crying to Hashem day and night from the decree. So therefore, we read about the miracle day and night to kind of talk about the crying that they cried about the day and night of the concern of the decree. Ekra b'mizber lamnatzeach Ayelet HaShachar. This is all in the Ayelet HaShachar, which is the 22nd verse chapter of Tehillim. Shenemer al Esther, and this capital of Tehillim was said on behalf of Esther. Obviously, Esther didn't write it. It was written by King David, but King David wrote a lot of futuristic things. And this capital was written on behalf of Esther and Mordechai. Why is Esther, the Gemara in Dir Yuma elaborates about Esther's connection to Ayelet HaShachar. We'll see more about that in Rabbi Steinsaltz footnotes. Okay, so he says over here, we read the Megillah at night, and then we redo it again, repeat it by day. Rabbeinu Tam goes to great length to prove. Okay, now the question is, we're going to learn this Rabbeinu Tam further down the page. But Rabbeinu Tam comes to ask the question, what is the Iker? And what's the Tafel? What's the main reading? We have a verse in Tehillim to support that the Jewish people cry day and night according to Rashi, therefore we read the Megillah day and night. But when is the main reading? So the Rabbi Evan Yisrael teaches us, Rabbi Evan Yisrael Steinsaltz teaches us, that Rabbeinu Tam goes to great length to prove that the essence of the mitzvah to read the Megillah is specifically during the day. The main part is the day. And that the purpose of reading it is mainly to add the obligation to read at night. It means that this that we're teaching us, that Rabbi Shimon Levi is saying, is not to teach us that we also read it by day, but we also read it at night. The mitzvah is to read it at day. And the pasuk supports to also read it at night. Based on the assertion, he determines that there is an obligation to recite the blessings he who has given us life, Shechianu, during the day, which goes to the question. We make a Shechianu, which is Shechianu means that's the blessing we make whenever something new comes. We do that at a lot of Yom Tovim, right? When do we make the Shechianu? Both by day and by night. So we know that we have the Chazan or the Gabbai announces in the shul to have kavanah for the mitzvah sayom. That's just in case. But the Rabbeinu Tam said in theory, I don't know, and I was never in Rabbeinu Tam's shul to know what he clapped on the tish. If he also added that you have to have kavanah mitzvah sayom, but he seems to say, the Rabbeinu Tam, that the ikar reading is the day, and therefore the Shechianu has to be read by day, even though you said Shechianu by night before. However, the Ramban rules that one recites the blessings prior to the reading of the Megillah only at night. So the Rambam disagrees with Rabbeinu Tam and says we do not read. It says the one recites this blessing of Shechianu only by night, because once you read it by night, you don't have to read it by day. It could be because of the suffix of the machlaikas, is why we say to have in mind the mitzvah sayom, which is Mishal Chamanas and Sudas Yamtiv and Matanas Avyonim, because these are the things that we do by day. So the Shechianu could be connected to that. We find that other times, like for instance, second day Yom Tov on Rosh Hashanah, when we make Shechianu both nights, that we're supposed to have a new fruit on the table. Because when we want to just have, if there's a suffix, to be able to apply the suffix bracha, because we have suffix brachas l'hakel, the rule is that when we don't know what to do in a blessing, we go lenient. So in order to give substance to the blessing, so we have a kavanah for mitzvah sayom. But just raw from the Rabbeinu Tam and Rambam, I have to check it again. We'll see the text. If Rabbeinu Tam holds we make a Shechianu by night, I can't imagine he says you don't make by night, because once you read it by night, to say that we only make the Shechianu by day seems a stretch. But the Rambam says we only say the Shechianu by night. Okay. As it states, "Oh my Lord, I call by day." Rashi writes that Psalm 22 Al Ayelet HaShachar is considered to be a prayer of Esther, and that everything mentioned in it is referring to the days of Purim. From this verse, the sages learn that just as in the time of suffering, which is based on Rashi, the Jews prayed at night and day, so too during the time of praise and commemoration of the miracle, it is fitting to express thanks both night and day. That's why the Ran explains Rashi, why we read the Megillah both night and by day. And one is obligated to read the Megillah at night from the time of the emergence of the stars, meaning from Tzeis HaKachavim, and to read it again during the day, from Ayelet HaShachar, from Nates. Okay, so that's what Rabbi Shua ben Levi says. So we already understand it to mean that we read the Megillah twice, but in the yeshiva they didn't understand exactly what Rabbi Shua ben Levi was saying. So the Sevirumine, the people in the yeshiva, misunderstood. That Vilishnaisa means not to repeat, but from the word Mishnah, that we read the Megillah by night, Vilimisnasam to learn the Mishnayis, the laws, Masnisin Dida B'Yayma, to learn Maseches Megillah by day. Amalu Rabbi Yirmiyah says no. Lididi mi Pasha le Mineid Reb Chia Barava. I understood from Reb Chia Barava, which evidently was a student or at least a colleague of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Reb Chia Barava was also around that time. He was also a student of Rebbe, like Rabbi Shua ben Levi was. But evidently, Rabbi Chia ben Levi, maybe when Rabbi Chia ben Avra was maybe a student or younger than Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Ever Parsha Dav Isniya. That the word lishnasa doesn't mean to just from the word mishnayis, but to repeat. Like a person says, for example, I will conclude this section and repeat it. It means to say that we repeat the Megillah itself, not to learn the mishnayis. Nothing wrong with learning the mishnayis on Purim, but that's not the obligation. The obligation is to read the Megillah a second time by day. So Rashi teaches us, Savra minei bnei yeshiva, the people of the yeshiva, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, sheshamu shmu zu b'lashon hakodesh. They heard Reb Shua ben Levi and they took his words literally in the holy tongue. V'lishnaisa b'yayim ha'yisayim. They thought the word lishnaisa, the high v'lishnaisa lashon shayna mishnahu. Maybe it's from the word mishnah. They wanted by night we read the Megillah and by day we learn Maseches Megillah. Lemisna masisin da mishnayis Maseches Megillah. They thought that maybe we learned the tractate of Megillah. So he says so Rabbi Yirmiyah says he heard from Reb Chia bar Abba that ever Parshasa Hader Asne Asayim Parshazu, I'm going to finish it, Veshana Oisi Pamshnir, and I'm going to repeat it. So it's from the word of repeat versus the idea of to study the tractate. You want to ask something, Aaron?
Yeah, okay. So one of the things on Purim is to get drunk. If you have all these rules to read and to study, how can you be drunk and study?
You read it, I mean, just technically we read the Megillah before we have the Suda.
Right, I understand that. But then you say spend the day studying.
No. That's what the yeshiva thought, but then he realized that that was not the pshat.
Oh, okay.
Shuki, carefully about the drinking, you mean?
No, what I'm saying is that if you when I drink, I'm not at my full potential to study. So how can I fulfill both mitzvahs to study and to drink?
Okay, so I'm saying that was the thinking of the Talmud, and the conclusion was it's talking about reading the Megillah. Of course, I think Shuki is pointing out is we drink carefully, we don't get too drunk. That's of course something you have to be careful with. Again, there's this famous story of the Baal Shem Tov's father, Rabbi Eliezer, who everyone was in the middle of Sudas Yom Tov and having their party, and there was a kind of a little bit of a decree in heaven why was no one learning Torah, and the Baal Shem Tov's father grabbed the Masechta, I think, and started to learn Talmud. All right, the good point, Aaron. Itmer Nami, we also learned Amar Rab Chelboy Amar Ula Bira'a, that Ula from the city of Bira said that we are supposed to read the Megillah by night. Vilishnaisa means to repeat, because again, I'm just checking the actual language of Yeshua ben Levi. It says Vilishnaisa, and here he says and again, so like it says, the mani zamrachavid v'lo yidaim. I'm going to sing your praises and I will not be silent. Hashem Elokai la'olam edek, I'm always going to praise you. And that's also a verse of 28 in that's the verse of Maseches Chanukas Abayis, chapter 30. Sorry, that again, I'm going to sing your praises and not going to be silent. By night also, I'm going to sing the praises. I was referring to the Megillah. Bira, what does it mean? Ula of Bira, the mean Biri. Biri, I guess, the city of Biri. Biri, however you pronounce that. I'm going to sing your praises by day. I won't be silent by night. This is chapter 30 of that starts off Mizmar Aramim Hashem Kidlisani. You elevated me because I was low. That's law that we learn that again. This is chapter 30 also. Is telling us about the story of Mordechai, Esther, Haman, and Achashverosh, the four main characters of the story of Purim. And again, the Megillah is a praise. Again, something that's sometimes lost on people. Megillah Esther is the idea of Pesuma Nisa. We're announcing and publicizing the miracle. And that's why, because of the emphasis of the publicizing the miracle, we have to do the Megillah in the most public setting. We have parties, we have events, we have signs. Everyone knows to come to the Megillah reading, because this is part of Pesuma Nisa, to publicize the miracle that was done for the Jewish people on the story of Purim. And everyone's praising Hashem for the miracle that happened on Purim. Now, this Tosfos we're going to learn. This is the Tosfos that Rabbi Steinsaltz, Even Yisrael, referred to before about Rabbeinu Tam's opinion, psak, that the Iker, the main part of the reading of the Megillah, is the day versus the night, and the opinion of the Rambam, who disagrees evidently with Rabbeinu Tam. So he says this: the law is that we have to read the Megillah by night and to repeat it by day. Omer Ri is another member of the Balei Tosfos. The Afagav the Mevarch Zman B'Layla, though we make Shechiyona by night, we again repeat it, the Shechiyona by day, the Iker Pesumanisa have a Bekriya Diyama, because the main, now the question is why? Why is the opinion of Ri, I'm assuming that's going to be the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam as well, why is the opinion of Ri that says that that the main reading is day? Because if Megillah reading is all about publicizing the miracle, we publicize the miracle by day much greater than the publication by night. He says, the main publicizing the miracles by day. Although Chanukah, the publicizing of the miracle, Pesuma Nisa of Chanukah is by night. So we see it's not that you can't do Pesuma Nisa by night, because Chanukah we do Pesuma Nisa by night. We do publicize the miracle by night. But for some reason, the Megillah, the main publicizing the miracles by day. Vikra Nami Mashma, and he said, the Ri says we have support from the verse that we're quoting, that we see that we read both night and day. What do we say? That you can't silence me by night? Means the main thing is to read it by day, but I'm going to also read it by night the night before. Quickly.
Does this have the publicizing it by day for Purim and not for Hanukkah? Does that have anything to do with because on Hanukkah, people are, you can do it, you have some hours to do it. So some people are out and about in the market, and by Purim, no one is working. So no one's out by the market. They're all in their shuls.
That's an excellent point. I could ask further. It's tradition today. Most people know. I mean, and it's not like a law anywhere, but most Purim parties are by night versus by day. Most of the Purim parties that people get kind of also go to a second reading and all that kind of days kind of on a lower key, let's say, than the parties at night. But that has nothing to do with okay. That could be according to the Rambam, but according to Rabbeinu Tam or the Ri, he says over here. But it's a good point you're saying, because they're not working and then they're working. All right, maybe. The main reading is the night, the day. So he says the reason is because the pasuk first says the day, then it says the night. And he says another reason, because the main meal is by day. Kedam l'kaman, as we're going to say later in page 7. If a person wants to eat the meal for Purim by night, you have not fulfilled your obligation of eating Sudas Yom Tov if you eat a Suda by night, meaning the night of the 14th or the 15th if you're celebrating on the 15th. We have a famous verse that says to remember and to do. Iskish zechiru lasiya. We have to connect the remembering to the doing. Ma ikra asiya b'yayma. Just like the main doing of the mitzvahs is by day, so the main remembering of the mitzvah is also by day. This leads into the question of when we talk about later about the villages, when we say the villages could read 11, 12, 13, which obviously how do they deal with Niskarim V'Nasim? If they read the Megillah on the 11th and they don't do the mitzvahs of Megillah until the mitzvahs of Purim until the 14th or 15th, 14th. So how do they come together with Niskarim V'Nasim? So you could say it's an exception to the rule, but there's another discussion of when can the villages hear the Megillah early? Is it only by day or also by night? So he quotes Reb Steinsaltz of Yisrael quotes L'mani Zamachavet V'lo Yidaim. So obviously the question is what's the connection to that specifically to the Megillah, and why does Rashi say that this chapter 30 as well as chapter 22, which is interesting because the what's mentioned in Tosfos in the Psak that we say chapter 22 on Purim, we don't say specific. I mean, we say chapter 30 anyways during davening and chakras, but it's not known to be said specifically for Purim. But here the Marsha adds that closing words of the verse, I will give thanks to you forever, alludes to the holiday of Purim, fitting with the words of the Jerusalem Talmud that state that the days of Purim will always exist and will not be annulled even in the world to come. There's the opinion that it says all the other holidays will no longer be holidays in the days of Mashiach, but Purim and Chanukah or Purim and others, certain exceptions, will also be celebrated in the days of Mashiach. So that's the idea of the Man Zamachavd V'lo Yidam, not just at night, but also like similar to the end of first chapter of Brachos, right? That we say that with the other Ben Azai says Mashiach. So there's an opinion that says Mitzrayim is also, there's a question if Lilas is added to Yitzis Mitzrayim, or is it also for the days of Mashiach? So to Purim, there's a question if it's just night or also Yimei Mashiach. We connect the night to Yimei Mashiach. Okay. Okay, so we finished this subject. We have a few minutes. Let's just go a little further. Hold on a second. The Ritva is the one who holds that the villages that are coming in on 11, 12, and 13, they only have the day that they could do earlier, but the night they can't, which obviously begs the question of what we discussed in the beginning of the tractate. What's the reasoning of why the villages could come in? If the reason is that they don't have a Balkora, they don't have a Balkora by night either. So seemingly, the depending on the reason, again, we have to remind ourselves what the Ritva's reason was. But seemingly, the Ritva's reason obviously was not because they didn't have They didn't have a Balkora because they wouldn't have a Balkora, someone to read the Megillah by night either. Unless it's maybe by night, the villages could gather together better than they could by day. He says over here, the Rosh brings down, the Rosh is one of the main psukim based on the Talmud, but he's one of the main authorities that the Shulchan Aruch leans on to know the law. The Rosh Rabbeinu Asher says, and he brings many proof that also the main reading is by day. And therefore, according to the Rosh, even though, we have not seen clearly in the Machlekes of, I'm not sure why Rabbi Steinsaltz says it's Rabbeinu Tam, unless it's another Rabbeinu Tam. Here it says Ri. But either way, when we talk about we talk about the question of the machlekes of Tosfos and the Rambam. If you make Shechiyonu by day or by night, seemingly the question is, when do you make the Shechiyonu? The Rosh says, maybe that's why we do La Halacha, that even if you make Shechiyonu by night, Chayzer Mevarach B'yom, you also make the Shechiyonu by day. And so he says over here, so says the Tosfos. So he understands the Tosfos to mean that we make the Shechiyonu both. Oh, he also clearly Tosfos says the Afagavdim Varchs Man Balai, the Chayzim Varch B'yom. Okay. The Rambam, he says in the laws of Purim law chapter 1 law 3 says that we don't say Shechiyanu by day, and so says the Tur. The Nod Yehuda again, we learned, you have to remember, there's a certain thing that's maybe lost on people. Although we call Purim a rabbinic holiday, which we should know this because we're learning that this is the subject of the tractate that we're learning. We call it a rabbinic holiday, but there's what's called Divrei Kabbalah and Divrei Rabbanon. Divrei Kabbalah means that if we know that clearly it wasn't just a rabbinic institution, it's part of the Ksuvim, it's part of the Tanakh. Is one of the tractates of one of the sections of the Tanakh of the Ksuvim of the writings is the Megillah. So it's called Divrei Kabbalah, which is kind of in between what you'd call biblical and rabbinic, straight up rabbinic. So he says the Nod Yehuda, a known halachic authority, anyone who you know whose last name is Landau, is usually a descendant of the Nod Yehuda, the Rav of Prague, that he says that only the Megillah by day is what's called the mitzvah midivrei Kabbalah, but the reading at night is rabbinic. Again, we went to the question, if the woman's obligation is rabbinic or also Kabbalah. But not everyone agrees with that. The Rokeach and the Birkei Yosef. The question comes in about Tashlumim. So we'll finish off instead of going to the next subject. Let's finish off with a few laws. The question is about Tashlumim. You know, Tashlum means if you miss something, if you have to redo it again. So if there's a possibility if you miss forever the Megillah by night, if you could read it 2 times by day, then it's a question of what's the connection, the difference between the day reading and the night reading. If the night reading is going to be rabbinic and day reading is Kabbalah or vice versa. So it goes into the question of the laws of Tashlumim if you have to read the Megillah twice. Okay, if you could make up for that. Just another thing, you guys, this is a trivia question that everyone could figure out because I tried it with a calculator and it didn't make sense to me. But the Menois Levi says that the Ayelet HaShachar, the word Ayelet HaShachar, is the number value of Zeh Mordechai Vester. So that's where we see a hint to that the chapter 22 of Tehillim is on behalf of Esther and Mordechai. My calculation came out 954 for Ayelet HaShachar and 953 for Mordechai and Esther, but maybe I have to count again. I tried it twice. But we know that in the number value, one off is not a big deal. The Medrash Shmuel says that what does it mean that chapter 22 is on behalf of Esther and Mordechai? That David HaMelech said it in divine spirit, in the name of Esther, as if she was speaking, which is an amazing thing. That means that the David HaMelech wasn't telling us the story of Esther and Mordechai, but wrote the entire chapter 22 as if Esther was speaking. Maybe that would answer our question why 22 is different than chapter 30. 30 could be telling us the story of Esther and Mordechai and Haman and Achashverosh, where chapter 22 is actually the prayer of Esther. Although David wrote it, but he wrote it in the tongue of Esther. All right, everyone, next week we'll start the next subject about villages and how that works. and why the villages have leniencies and etc. Thank you so much for joining. Laila Tov and Shavua Tov. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.